Now, piecing all of this together and applying pressure and taking care of Joe and loving on him, it began to work its magic. Now, to our everlasting credit, my wife and I, Susan and I, young parents that we were, did not go crazy. Now, I want to stress that because sometimes emotion can fuel other emotions. We know that. If someone else is upset and we get upset, they become more upset. And then we become more upset, and it's a vicious cycle that we find ourselves in. There was nothing we could do at that moment in time about Joe having done something he shouldn't have done, and there was nothing we could do at that moment in time about the fact that he had cut his chin. All we could do was try to make the situation better, and so we started talking to him. And we started telling him, here, Joe, let's see what we can do. And we took his shirt off and washed his arms and hands off. The blood was no longer there. Put a clean t-shirt on him. And interestingly enough, after we put the pressure there, the bleeding stopped on the chin. We put a Band-Aid over the chin. As far as Joe was concerned, he sees no blood. He can feel the wound no longer. As far as he's concerned, he's healed. But as far as Susan and I were concerned, we knew the problem was really just about to start. Because Joe needed what? That's right, stitches. Now, we did not mention this fact to Joe. There's no sense in getting him all cranked up too early or unnecessarily. Instead, what we said to Joe was, Joe, we're going to have to go let the doctor take a look at that chin. Well, Joe had been at the doctor before. Every kid at 3 years old is familiar with going to the doctor. And he didn't have any particular problems with going to the doctor. So as far as he was concerned, it was an adventure. So here we go. We take our daughter next door. The neighbors agreed to keep her while we headed to the doctor's office. Susan, Joe, and I loaded up into the van, and off we go to the doctor's office. Again, Susan and I are trying to be cheerful and cheery. Again, dreading what's going to happen. But Joe seemed no worse for the wear for the entire experience. We get to the doctor's office, we get out of the van, we go into the office, and as we enter the office, I say to them, listen, y'all sit down right here. Let me go up here and talk. So Joe and Susan took a seat by the door. I walked up to the receptionist desk. I introduced myself. I said, hi, I'm Phillip Van Hooser. My wife Susan, my son Joe over there by the door. Joe got his chin. He needs stitches. She said, oh, I understand, sir. She said, listen, I said, I'm a little concerned that if people start coming in and asking about what's wrong with him, that they're going to say he's going to have stitches. And I haven't told him anything about stitches. She said, no, I understand. But unfortunately, the doctor's not here right now. He's still at the hospital making his rounds. He should be here the next 20 or 30 minutes. So if you want to wait in the examination where people won't see you, then as soon as the doctor's here, we'll send him right in. He'll take care of your problem. Should not be any problem. Thought that sounded like a good deal. So we followed her into the examination. Now, as we enter the examination room, and all of us have been in doctors' examination rooms before, but maybe you haven't been in a pediatrician's examination room. It has the table, it has the chairs, it has all of the equipment available, but it also has toys in the floor. After all, it's for children. And so when Joe walked in, he saw the toys on the floor, he thought, this is great. He immediately threw himself into the floor, and within minutes, he was playing contentedly, having a big time. Susan, on the other hand, and I pulled up 2 chairs that were there. We pulled them up almost knee to knee. Now, we weren't talking very much because Joe was present, and so we weren't really talking about the circumstance. But we learned later that as we sat knee to knee, looking at each other, we were in fact thinking the same thing. Why did we have children? How many of y'all been there one time or not? Yeah, okay. Now, I love my kids, but at that moment in time, I wasn't enjoying being a parent. And yet, it's not something that I can avoid. It's one of those things we've got to deal with. So we sat there for the next 20 or 30 minutes, and then all of a sudden the door opened, and in he walked, the doctor. Now, it's very important for you to know that I had never met this doctor before, nor had my wife, but most importantly, neither had our son Joe. He was a total stranger to all of us. But I knew he was a doctor because as soon as he walked in, he had a white lab coat on, he had a stethoscope wrapped around his neck. I stood up. I've been taught my manners. I stood up, he walks in, I immediately extended my hand. He took my hand, I introduced myself. Hi, sir, my name is Phillip Van Hooser. This is my wife, Susan. He greeted us both warmly, took literally seconds. And then we turned our attention to Joe. Now, when I last saw Joe, just prior to the doctor coming in the office, Joe was playing contentedly on the floor. He didn't have a care in the world. The doctor comes in the office, and I turn my attention to the doctor and away from Joe. But when then the introductions were over and we turned our attention back to Joe, Joe was not playing contentedly in the floor. Nope, he was standing looking just like this at the doctor. The doctor says to him, "Hi, Joe." And without 1 second hesitation, Joe said, "I ain't getting no stitches." Now, where did that come from? Because I know for a fact my wife and I had not mentioned anything about stitches. And yet, isn't it interesting how often in life we try to shield people from the truth or from the reality or what's going to happen next, when in fact they already know what's going to happen. The only question is, when will you communicate with them what they already know is going to be true? But anyway, he looks up at the doctor and said, "I ain't getting no stitches." Well, apparently the doctor had been down this road before because he didn't immediately give up. Instead, he looked at my son. He says, he said, "Do you mind if I have a look at your chin anyway?" 3-year-old Joe. "Oh, I don't mind." So the doctor leaned over and he takes the Band-Aid off the chin. He has Joe lean his head over. He looks at the chin for a second. Then he stands up and he starts to stroke his own chin. Joe's still looking at him. He says, "Joe, we got a problem." Joe's looking at him. He said, "Yeah, we got a real problem." Joe says, "What is it?" He said, "Well, you said a moment ago that you weren't getting any stitches. But now I've looked at that chin. If we don't sew that chin up, when you're eating your pork chop, it's going to fall out on your belly." That wasn't good for Joe. He said, "That is a problem." He said, "Joe, come here. Let me talk to you for a second." And with that, he picks my son up and he carries him over to the examination table and he sets him on the examination table. Now look what I'm about to do now. For the rest of their conversation, this is exactly how the doctor stood. Now I don't intend to stand that way as I tell you the story, but this is how he stood, looking directly into my son's eyes, literally inches from his face. Now I was inches from my son too on this side, and my wife was inches from my son on the other side, but my son, our son, paid no attention to us whatsoever. He wasn't communicating with us, nor was he being communicated to by us. He was talking with the doctor, and the doctor leaned to him and he said, "Joe, we need to talk." And with that, he started talking. He said, "Joe, I got a problem, buddy." He said, "Just a minute ago, you said you didn't want to have stitches." He said, "But I'm telling you I need to sew that chin up." And he said, "So, I don't do this for everybody. Not all my patients get this, but you're a special little boy, I can tell already, and therefore I'm going to treat you special. Let me tell you what I'm going to do, Joe. I'm going to give you cat whiskers." He said, "That's right, I'm going to give them to you right in your chin. Cat whiskers. Not everybody gets cat whiskers, but you're special and you're going to get them." He said, "But what's more important than getting the cat whiskers is I want you to understand exactly what's going to happen as you get those cat whiskers." And with that word, he reaches into his pocket and he produces the object of my greatest concern. It's what I've been worried about for the last hour. It's a what? That's right. He looks at my son and he says, "Joe, do you know what this is?" And I'm thinking to myself, "No, sneak up on